It's the Sod Pod, brought to you by Grassland Agro. The Sod Pod. Hello, and welcome to the Sod Pod. We're absolutely flying along. We're in August 2025. Good year so far, lads. What's going on, Peter? What's your own take on?
Yeah, so I suppose, look, at a good year, as you said, I suppose it's a bit of a mixed bag there too. Like, I know, was it maybe last month or so, we were struggling with the soil moisture deficits. We were there was fodder back in the diet and stuff like that, but thankfully now growth rates are starting to creep back up to where they should be. Look, it's still definitely, in parts of the country they're still struggling to just build them covers back up to where they need to be. And I suppose, look, when you factor in, I suppose now we're at the stage where we're looking at, kind of looking at fodder budgets, have we enough? There could be still some pinch points on farms there where they may not have enough fodder there, that they may as well then, that'll be putting extra pressure on the milking platform and whatnot. Like, I know, Clodagh, you were saying, is there areas where you are that are quite, that they're struggling still to build covers up where they need to be? Or?
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit of a mixed bag, I suppose, down the south. Like, I think the rain definitely came when it was needed. I know on a couple of farms, as you said, like, fodder was being supplemented, farm cover was down around 350, 450 across the milking platform, but look, I suppose it's going to take time to build that back up again, but look, 'tis grand. The rain came when it was needed.
Yeah. And I suppose, John, you were talking a bit more on the fodder budget, and what's the crack with it? Or?
Yeah, I suppose on farming, like, it's always good to be proactive about things and looking ahead, and definitely fodder budgeting is definitely good practice. Every farm has its own unique circumstances, its own unique challenges. The weather patterns, as you've been saying there, have been quite varied geographically across the country this year. Overall, it's been good growth, but in some regions there's been bits of drought there in May. There's been some challenges around silage harvesting and that, so fodder budgeting is always good practice just to see where you're at, especially for the likes of new entrants as well and new farmers that are just figuring things out. You're trying to figure out how much fodder you need for the winter, and even experienced farmers as well. It's always good practice just to assess where you're at, how much fodder there is in the yard, put the figures into the calculator, and just to see how much you need for the winter ahead. There's a few calculators there online you can use. Chagos have one, I think the Farmers Journal have another one. Just putting in things like your stocking rate, how much silage you have in the yard from your cuts, or even if you've carried over from stuff from last year, and just to kind of predict how long next year's winter will be as well. Maybe it might be a 7-month winter, and then importantly then to put a buffer there as well, maybe a 20-25% buffer. That's what Chagos have been recommending, so it's just important data to collect and just to give you a bit of confidence going forward, build a bit of resilience.
I know, like, I suppose if we look at this year, we had a relatively good straightforward spring, so there probably is extra fodder there in the yards. So, like, really, if we're at this stage now, given the fact we've come out of quite a early spring, I know we have had a pinch point in the middle of the summer in terms of grass growth and some second cuts for a week, but we hadn't got a long winter as such, due to that good spring. So kind of if we're on a deficit now, it's probably a good chance to evaluate, well, is there something out of sync in the system that needs to be tweaked? Because like if you fast forward to next year, we could be going a very different spring. So it's going to be a very different situation. Like if there's something out this year, there's a good chance. But in a more, I would say, typical year where we're going to be challenged in extreme wet conditions.
I suppose the big thing is the fodder budget, it gives you time to act. Do you know what I mean? You're spotting your problems in the yard. If you need to buy bales, you're not panic buying. And as well, I suppose financially you're budgeting the whole time, you're kind of calculating how much money you might need to purchase fodder. So overall, I suppose from a financial point of view, it's good as well.
Yeah, and funny, that's something, like, I know talking with one farmer there recently, he'll always do that sort of budget now and buy sort of in that August time, because I know other farmers would sort of say, no, I'll wait to see how I get on in the spring. But as that first farmer told me, come spring, you're not buying what you want in terms of quality. You're buying whatever you can get your hands on, and you're paying the same price for stuff that's maybe a very poor quality silage that you're going to have to supplement a lot of extra meal in with. Whereas, if you can get good quality stuff, you're paying the exact same price for it. So you may as well, buy once and not have to go and top it up with some other supplement as well.
Yeah.
So, it just allows you to be ahead of the curve, I suppose, in that point of view.
Yeah, just building resilience overall, because the weather patterns are very changeable, as we've seen over the years. So, it's always good to be thinking ahead and being proactive about things whenever you can.
So really, the budget is to see us any stress points in the future.
Yeah.
You're not caught short when it happens. It's just to be planning ahead.
Yeah.
Is it a big job?
No. All you have to do is collect a bit of data from your farm. A lot of it you've used already for your nutrient management plan if you have one. Your stock numbers, etc. Plug it into the calculator, and that'll do the conversions for you, and it'll give you an overall estimation as what you need to do.
And probably the point, I suppose, doing it now, the relevance of it, you're doing it now though, but it's to try to stay at a very important or critical point of the year in that springtime period when typically a lot of cows are calving and they're going to be in the most need for the quality silage. They're facing into a negative energy balance naturally within the cow's biology, and to match grass supplies that's there. So it's really about being proactive and sort of teeing up that cow the following year to try and make sure that you're not, caught short with any poor quality silage, or buying, as I say, what you have to buy as opposed to what you actually want.
Yeah, definitely.
And Stephen, what's the outlook on your side of the house, the tillage side?
Different side of the house. Yeah, so harvest is well underway now. I suppose the winter barley is wrapped up. Yields generally poured 3.5-4 tonnes to the acre, which is, we probably call it typical enough, but the price of grain, it's not really adding up too well. I suppose average yield maybe 3.7 tonnes to the acre. I think the slot of winter barley in the rotation after winter wheat, there's probably the take-on is affecting it, and it is holding back the yield a bit. So maybe going forward, farmers should look to put winter barley after break crops, or even spring barley would have less take-on and occupant in the soil, because growing a crop over the whole year and getting 3.7 tonne at the current grain prices just isn't really adding up, especially in rented land. But I suppose in terms of the oats, mixed enough fields too, 3.5 tonne, 4 tonne, in around there, but maybe not the highest cost to grow. But again, the grain prices are fairly low in oats as well, so it's not too exciting on that front. But we were getting good nice bursts of warm weather in July. We were getting through it anyway, even though there was splashes of rain. I'd say the rape is mostly wrapped up as well. Yields are quite good at the rape, about 2 tonne and over, and I think rape is a good crop going forward. In recent years, with improvements in genetics, a lot of ground made in terms of yield is steadily increasing, and I think the yield stability is the big one, and it's something farmers can it's a crop farmers can rely on now. A lot of farmers were afraid of it for a long time because you get erratic enough yields, but the last 4 or 5 years we're steady enough yields around the 2 tonne mark, and I suppose one shining light is the price of oilseed rape. It's grand at the moment, compared to the cereals. But in terms of spring barley and winter wheat, then it's a little bit early to comment on the yields. I know farmers are cutting away on them now, but I just haven't got a good grasp on it just yet. But I suppose that's the update in terms of yields and whatnot anyway.
And from just, I suppose, thinking around the animal side, from a straw point of view, is there any takeaway that's sort of yielding at the minute? Or? Yeah,
there's good crops of straw around. I think you could say there's good crops of everything around this year. Right. Even maize and wheat as well, just as a side note, there seems to be good crops of everything. But yeah, straw, there were a lot of winter barley sown last year, and that's always sought after straw. So that's settled the market a bit, I think. And then if they have the straw chopping scheme is still there, and a lot of people would put oats and oilseed rape into it, so that's holding a bit of a bottom in the market, in fairness. But I think there's a fair amount of straw available from what I can grasp so far anyway. I suppose then leading on to that, you have to start looking at stubble cultivation. So we obviously have the nitrates directive there, with the rules that have been in for the last couple of years that the department are enforcing. So the rules haven't changed. It's just a reminder to anyone obviously harvesting crops that stubble cultivation, if it's going to be a spring crop next, it has to be done within 10 days of baling, or if the straw is chopped within 10 days of harvest. So that's a light cultivation, no more than 2 inches deep, and that's just getting green cover growing and helping with water quality. And of course you can sow a cover crop either. It's just that also qualifies. Another rule to that is that 20 to 25% of your land is meant to be left uncultivated over winter, as we need habitat for birds and mammals to forage on over the winter. So that's something to be careful of too, but just work out your acreage of spring cropping and subtract your 20-25%. And that kind of leads into your post-harvest weed management too, which I think is a huge thing going forward, because we're constantly losing herbicide active ingredients, and grass weed challenges, I think is one of the biggest challenges to the tillage sector going forward, apart from land availability. We really need to use cultural controls rather than relying on chemicals, and because we're losing a lot of herbicides. But the department rules sort of lead into, by doing that light cultivation, you're getting weeds growing, you're making a stale seedbed, and it can be worth doing even ahead of a winter crop, because if you can get your weeds to germinate and you get to spray them off, burn them off with glyphosate prior to sowing, then you're not stuck using your selective herbicides in the growing crop, and that's going to be particularly important going forward. With the likes of Italian ryegrass, there's a lot of talk about that year. This Italian ryegrass this year, Teagasc are promoting the dangers of it. In fairness, and they're doing good work with that. But it's one to be very careful of, because there's strains that are resistant to all sorts of herbicides and even Roundup. So we'll have to be careful of that going forward.
Well, what complications have been caused with this, with Italian ryegrass? Is it just taken over, or?
Yeah, very, very competitive weeds. It'll take over the field if not controlled. Your typical herbicides, selective herbicides, aren't killing it, essentially. So if you can't get the better of it, then you're looking at whole crops just to stop seed return, or roguing it's quite difficult, because there's so many tillers, and it's like trying to rogue a field of grass. It's kind of half impossible. So it's something to be very careful of, and I suppose just make sure cover crop seed that's being used, make sure it's of a decent quality, because a lot of it is imported. You don't want to be importing problems on farm. But it's a big problem going forward, and you have to be. It's important to identify your weeds as well prior to harvest, because different weeds like soft brome or rye brome should actually be left on the surface of the soil for a few weeks prior to cultivation, because by leaving them on the surface of the soil, the light actually breaks the dormancy of the seed, and that's what it needs so that it'll germinate. But that's just soft brome, rye brome and black grass should be left on the surface for a few weeks. All the other grass weeds typically should be cultivated immediately, just to get them chitted, and so you can kill them, and generally you spray them off with glyphosate at the 1 to 2 leaf stage.
So really that's kind of like a proactive measure, is it, that you're taking care of them before you actually go in and sow it, is it?
Yeah, definitely. Prevention is definitely far better than cure, especially the way things are going. And on that point, before you even do that, your cultivation, you should be looking at crop rotation is critical as well, because if you can include break crops, particularly where you have weed problems with grass weeds, the likes of Irish drape or beans, you have a whole different range of chemistry, and you can use herbicides that may kill these grass weeds, whereas the ones in the cereals aren't working. So it's just broadening your options in terms of grass weed control. And even a step before that, when you're harvesting fields with weeds in them, I suppose hygiene of combines and balers is actually very important. Blowing them down before you go to the next field, so that you're not dragging seeds into the next field. But it's something to be very, very mindful of anyway, going forward.
Don't drag the problem to the next field.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I suppose then on cover crop establishments, there's several schemes for doing that now. Acres has been ongoing for a few years, and it's an option in acres. And this year there's a new project, the European Innovation Partnership, or EIP. They're doing a farming for nature pilot project, farming for water, and that's quite a attractive looking scheme. It's a lot more flexible than the acres. I think there is a good bit of interest in it. So you've two options there. You can sow a cover crop, you get it in before the end of July, and you can have it in until you're sowing your winter crop, so it's a short-term cover crop, and there's a good payment of €173 a hectare for that. And then there's a cover crop option for overwinter, has to be left in situ till the 1st of January, so prior to your spring cropping. And there's slightly higher payment for that. So the rules are not the same as acres. To cover crop over winter has to be in by the 1st of September, it has to be in a bit earlier. Acres the 15th of September. But the species and the inclusion rates are the same as acres. So just make sure you use at least the minimum inclusion rates to qualify for the scheme, and keep your seed dockets to prove that you did in fact sow them. In terms of species selection, then it's quite important that you choose them carefully, because there's a lot of different species do a lot of different things for the soil or the land. One to note is brassicas, cover crops. They're very good, especially if they're sown a little bit later. They keep growing when it's a little bit colder, and they're very good for feeding livestock. But they shouldn't be used if you're going oilseed rape in your rotation, because it will exacerbate the build-up of club root. So that will have detrimental effects on your oilseed rape. So the likes of your leafy turnip and your tillage radish are very good for feeding like store lambs over the winter, but that's just something to be wary of. And on the tillage radish, that's quite a good one if you're looking to break up compaction. Then you have other ones like you have clovers, berseem and crimson clover are good for fixing nitrogen. Ideally should be probably sown in July, as they like the warmer temperatures. And then you have Phacelia and vetch are kind of soil conditioners, they make the soil more friable. And then buckwheat is meant to increase the availability of phosphorus. So there's a lot of different options there, and it's about choosing the right one to suit your system, I suppose.
It sounds like if you get it wrong, it could go badly wrong in terms of what you're saying, like having to allow a certain amount of time between, a break crop or, to avoid club root. Like, is there any kind of minimum, you say in 4 or 5 years you'd have to wait?
Definitely, yeah.
Or what's the sort of...
5 years is the best practice. Some people chance 1 in 4, but I think that's nearly gone out the window at this stage.
Right.
1 in 5 is the best, and then an important point is pH, and it leads on to oilseed rape establishments. You really want to be making sure pH is up at 6.8 or 7 before you sow your oilseed rape, because that'll be starting now in a few weeks' time, in 3rd or 4th week in August. That has a huge effect on the club root issue. If you can keep your pH up, it'll drastically reduce the risk. So they're the only measures you can take, really, rotation and pH. But I suppose in terms of establishing oilseed rape, then pick varieties. There's, as I said at the start, there's good options there now, good stable yields and high yielding varieties, and choose varieties with good disease resistance. Do a bit of research on it. Standing strength, resistance to lodging, and I suppose getting it in early does seem to have benefits in terms of just getting it up and away when it's warmer. So in August rather than September, because kind of grows away from slugs and pigeons. So, and then I think a valuable part of getting it in early and getting it up and away is it gets very competitive if it doesn't get grazed by pigeons, and it actually crowds out the weeds. It's nearly the best weed control you can get, which comes back to dealing with your weed problems. It's kind of like another culture method, I think. And a good way of getting the oilseed rape up and going is using organic manures. Applying them in the autumn time, even though it's quite a busy time here, if it can be done at all. The oilseed rape is very efficient, as it converts the nitrogen in the manures, or any residual nitrogen from the previous crop, into biomass. And unlike cereals, you can actually cut back in your chemical nitrogen applications in the springtime then. So you're saving on costs, and obviously environmental benefits of not using less chemical fertiliser. So it's a good opportunity to use manures. And I suppose just finish up on then, if manures aren't available, I think it is beneficial to include maybe an NPK and sulphur compound just at a small rate, just to get it up and running. It just increases rooting, and there is work to show if you can get P and K into the seed bed, that's when they're sown oilseed rape, it'll increase the nitrogen use efficiency and just get the crop rooting established early. I think we have a great product for that situation in Top Phos, because Top Phos, it has neutral charge. So typically if you applied phosphorus in the back end, you wouldn't do it in the grassland farm because you'd be afraid of lockup. And I think it's similar in a cereals farm. It's not ideal in cold temperatures, but the fact that Top Phos doesn't have the neutral charge, it's not getting locked up over winter. So Top Phos is available for what the oilseed rape needs to get going, But what the oilseed rape doesn't use, it will be available in the springtime for that burst of growth. So I think it just fits nicely into that slot. So it's something to something to consider possibly if you're establishing oilseed rape. And also the top phosphate, the sulphur, which is very important in brassicas too, for amino acids and protein production. But
and on that, isn't the department have an allowance for winter crops too? You can sow a certain amount of your pea.
Yeah.
Now, can you?
That's right. I suppose you can broadcast it until the 15th of September, or even as a winter cereal, you can put pea into the seedbed if it's going down the pipe drill.
Okay.
So that's an exception you have, and I believe you can carry your phosphorus allowance forward then if it's for next year's crop.
Okay.
So it's just something to take note of anyway, because obviously phosphorus allowances are watched tightly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What's the job, Steve? I wish I took more notes.
Actually, you can listen to the podcast.
Exactly, yeah.
That sounds like if you're not harvesting, baling, or going to be cultivating, you'll be watching the calendar to make sure you comply with certain scheme requirements.
It's certainly a busy time of year for the farmer.
Yeah.
It's fairly mad stuff, so just don't overdo it. Try to get as much help as you can and stay safe, as we always say.
That's the job. And Peter, back end reseeding.
Yeah, sure, look, I suppose it's sort of coming across the radar now. Again, look, there is positive to see some lads have been proactive in terms of, they're already getting in and getting at it.
Yeah.
Then again, like that, when you talk to other farmers, it's not something that might be on the radar yet. They're only maybe thinking of burning off or whatever. But I suppose the big thing, or the big challenge with the back end reseeding is you're heading to the back end of the year where weather typically can go against you. And nearly what I would sort of suggest looking at would be, realistically, if you know your farm, if you do get rainfall in October and you struggle to graze, and you reseed in October, walk backwards, because when you want to graze it, so just say you take the beginning of October. If you take a week off that from when you play your post-emergent spray, reverse another 5 weeks, that's when you're going to be sowing. 2 weeks before that, you're going to be going with your glyphosate or your Roundup spray to kill it off. So really it's about, even though we have lovely weather now, I think it's an ideal time to do it. If you're on a heavier farm, actually will you actually, when you sow the crop in 5 weeks, 6 weeks times, if there's a wet period that you typically, struggle with there, you're actually going to be able to get in and spray it, because that post-emergent spray is very important. But also, what's that going to do? That's going to push out your grazing by that week, or even in some sprays it could be 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So really just look at the timing for your individual farm. If you are going to be fair enough to try your farm and you've no issues grazing later, typically in a normal year, that won't be an issue. I suppose, look at the principles of it. It's they're the same there really. I suppose you're trying to burn off the old grass that's there. Ideally, you're always trying to leave it as long as you can, not going in too quick. Probably the minimum you'd be allowing is 10 days. Ideally, allow up to 2 weeks to try and get any old weeds that's there fully killed off, and it goes into the root actually, because again, trying to, I suppose if you move too quick with your cultivation, there's a chance that weed could regerminate, and you'll be trying to battle it then, I suppose, with a younger, leafier sort of new reseed grass that's not going to be it's going to be more susceptible. I suppose the lime is going to be very important too. Obviously, it's a great chance when you're doing reseed if you need to get lime on. And look, I know there's various different questions that have been coming in there over the last few weeks from farms about going with lime, straight urea, protected urea, lime slurry first, which we can probably touch on a little bit after. But when you're reseeding, it is a great chance to get it on, regardless of whether you're going to be ploughing or going the min-till route. Mm-hmm. But definitely it's important to try and work it into the seed bed, particularly with the min-till option, where you're going to have a lot of maybe rubble or sort of old grass and weeds on the top surface. And then obviously you're always looking to try and get that firm seed bed, to try and get the maximum soil seed contact, give that seed a chance to germinate. And obviously then your P and K or your N&P allowances to try and see, well, number one, what are you allowed to spread? I know that's something that our guys on the ground earlier in the year, if the farmer does try to do some back end reseeding, we have an allowance of P there. Mm-hmm. Typically with your index 3 soils, you're going to be trying to get maybe 30 units on, and obviously depending on soil indexes, if you're at a 2 or a 1, you're going to be adding another 10 units on each of them, roughly speaking. And then with your nitrogen, you're going to be trying to get it at least 30 units on its own as well. So you have a few different variables there to try and I suppose worked on, and again just not to, I suppose, not to overlook the P allowances and the nitrogen allowances that's there. And then obviously look, you have a whole other host on or other factors in terms of the likes of your PPI, your pasture profit index to pick for. Like I know, Clodagh, that you were saying before, that was something that you were looking a wee bit at, and the relevance of it.
Yeah, I think it's no harm for farmers, as Stephen was saying, to do a bit of research into the seed that you're using. Keep it to, I suppose, 4 different varieties of grass seed, because otherwise you're diluting performance. But the PPI, look, you can find it there on the Teagasc website. It's kind of like an EBI report for your grass seed. So if you're looking at a grass seed, you're kind of looking at your grazing utilisation, your grass quality, and a variety of hidden dates, because you don't want a situation, I suppose, in the month of June where all the grass is hidden out at the one time. So just to keep an eye on those few things. I suppose, look, farmers are spending a lot of money on reseeding, so we want to make sure that, I suppose, you're putting in the right variety, and you're going to get the best return out of it.
How would you identify a field that needs to be reseeded? Like, what are you really looking for? Just some lads are just like, I run a 5-year model, you run a 3-year model, and I speak to other guys, and they have a field that has been reseeded in 15 years and it's flying it. Like, so what are you looking for?
It's probably like if you're doing, I suppose, your routine with your farm walks. I know not every farmer is, and say for example you're doing 25, 20, 30 farm walks in the year, and you have data on each of your fields to know which fields are optimum performing. That'll highlight straight away, I suppose, if you have something there that's suboptimal in terms of, it could be anything from half a tonne to a tonne and a half short. If it's, because that's typically a new reseed, you'll be able to, get that extra genetic merit from the seed. So you can look at your pasture based data. If you're not into grass measuring, and generally speaking you've a rotation in grazing, but you're not measuring your grass, you'll always know the field that if you're grazing every, just say 21 days or whatever it is, if you're always coming into a field that seems to be lower, a lower cover, even though it's getting this, the same routine application as the rest of the farm, that you'll see a picture or a trend building that way. So there's different ways you can look at it, James.
But if you're not grass measuring, you are running the risk then, I'm going to speculate here, that the field might be performing because it's suboptimal in P or K, and you're deciding to reseed it because you're not really studying your soil samples. Isn't that the risk of just running a reseed model as opposed to walking, looking, measuring data?
Absolutely, and even, I suppose, the performance of a reseed will be heavily dictated by the management of it, and your post-graze and heights and whatnot. So even by you actually plugging in that data and being tuned into it, that'll also, I suppose, give you a fair good grasp of it in terms of what the field is performing if it's not, So there's a few different factors there, and absolutely, like the P and K is a big one. If you're not soil testing, obviously you run that risk definitely, James.
Or if you are soil testing because you have to, and you fire them into the press as well, Because these are the realities of what we see as well, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's very much a targeted approach, because there's such a varying different soil type across farms now. Particularly as you could have a high part of it, you could have a low part, some south facing, north facing, and it's all going to have different influential characteristics on it.
In terms of picking a cultivation method, I know there's 4 different ones out there that are commonly used, all very effective, just depending on your particular field or your situation. Would that be fair to say as well? It
would, look, it probably comes down to a farmer preference really. And I suppose the time, I suppose this time of year you're not going to be over sowing clover as such. It's going to be a full reseed method. But then if you're in April, some farmers are trying to get in more clover, might try and use a combination of over sowing and doing a full reseed with that. So it's really down to, I suppose, individual farms, what they feel is going to suit them. And I suppose if you are, it's always very important, if you are bringing in the plough, be cautious not to bury the fertile soil too deep, so just to be aware of the different pros and cons to each. I think that's the biggest thing. Once you're aware of the pros and cons, you are going into, try and get when you do burn off the grass, try and get as much of that, dead grass grazed off, or even the mower, to come in and mow it and bale it off, just to get it off, because if you leave it out on the surface, it will have an impact on the germination. It's the management after it really that's important.
If you're unsure as well, consult your nearest advisor, I suppose, just
Absolutely. Yeah, no, always good to do, definitely.
And just one last question, Peter. You kind of said about working back the weeks and be wary of where your farm's based and all.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided today I'm going to reseed this field.
Mm-hmm.
How many weeks do I need? I can't reseed it today.
Well, I suppose typically when you burn it off, you're going to be minimum 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming you get it ploughed or tilled and sown, then it's going to be at minimum probably typically say 4 to 6 weeks. Probably looking, if we say call that 5 weeks.
Yep.
Then you're in with your post-emergent spray. It's going to be very important, especially if you're doing a min-till method. When you put on that spray, the majority of sprays now are going to be 1 week sort of from when you apply them. You have a 1 week residual effect there before you can actually graze it. So there's what 5, 6. You could be talking 7 weeks out of the earliest, like. But if you know now the mission, if you get a wet back end and in 7 weeks from now you struggle to graze, you're not going to go graze and you reseed. In that case, you could be better off. Are you able to get maybe lime out in the back end and be ready for the next following year? Because that post management of it is critical. Even to get that grazing in every reseed now in ROI, like by the nitrotrigs we have to put in clover into the mix now.
Mm-hmm.
So really, if you leave that clover, if you don't get that graze in the back end, the clover really needs to be, needs to get late. Mm-hmm. And obviously if you leave it heavy coverage over the winter, you're going to really jeopardise the clover's ability to thrive. So straight away it's that post management again, where you're trying to graze covers low, try and let the light down to help the grass and the clover.
Yes.
So it's just about weighing it all up really.
Yeah, probably ideally young stock to be going to grazing.
Ideally, ideally. But look, different lads have different approaches, and again, it's different horses for different horses. It's about what you feel will work.
Yeah.
And to give Clodagh a hugely exciting topic, NMP allowances, Clodagh.
Yeah, look, I won't go into the nitty gritty of how to calculate them, but it definitely is something that I suppose causes a bit of uncertainty on farm, and farmers do get confused over it, and sometimes it does result in some farmers not actually purchasing compounds because they're unsure of what their allowances actually are. So I suppose now is a good time to look at it, because if you're looking at building covers for autumn time, allocating allowances to reseeding, or in some cases some farmers are looking to put grass aside for a third cut, they all need to be fertilised, so it's a good time to look at it. I suppose in terms of your nitrogen, there was a 5% cut this year, so it's a good idea to have a look at it. It's calculated based on the total, your grassland stocking rate for the milking platform. So you divide your total organic nitrogen produced on the farm, divide that by the total hectares, and then there's a tiered approach then as to how much chemical nitrogen you have. So you can look on your fertiliser database on Ag Food what fertiliser you've bought, look at that compared to your allowances. Phosphorus then is down to your soil samples and what P index they're coming back with. Any farmer over a stock rate of 130 kilograms of organic nitrogen now has to have soil samples, so that will determine your allowances. So I suppose the most important thing is to look at it now. If you are unsure, consult someone, Grass and Agro advisor or Chagas advisor. Another thing to note as well, Stephen had mentioned acres. There is a rule under acres as well. If you're carrying out extensive grazing as part of acres, you are operating at a reduced allowance as well for that, just to bear that in mind. So as well, look just as well to, if any farmers out there have any stocks of unprotected urea, there's a ban on that from the 15th of September, so just to get those used up as well.
And it's probably worth mentioning too, just on the ag food, it gets reporting your nitrogen, whatever nitrogen you've bought in kilos.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important just to work that back if you're in units or whatever. Like, just say a farmer's going for a protected urea and sulphur product now, they commonly say 38% nitrogen with 7.6% sulphur. For every 100 kilos, that's about 5.5 bags, or 5.25 bags of that 38% nitrogen product. So it's just don't sort of make sure you see that it's in kilos and don't be working it back in units. There's a slight conversion there.
There is calculators online on the Irish Fertiliser Association online, they can convert it from kilos a hectare to units an acre. So if you're unsure, like.
Yeah, and I suppose it's very important, like what you said there, Clodagh, it's as you look at that now, because the last thing you want is to, spread away the nitrogen for now. Next thing, end of August, beginning of September, you're thinking, right, I want to try and prolong my grazing here. And next thing you've overcooked it, so it's a very, very important thing.
Yeah, I think that's where our nutrient management plan comes into its own as well, because it's planning that out for you. And it just, our sales of our advisors on the ground, they can help you just make sure you don't go over your limits. They're dealing with every day of the week. It's good to go to them for advice. And even on what you were saying, Peter, or you were saying, James, about deciding when to reseed. Our people on the ground are seeing this every day, so they're very useful for just offering advice.
Yeah. It's very easy to blow the budget too. Like even if you go for a third cut late in the summer, not being aware of your NMP allowances, it's very easy to blow your NMP budget. You want to see out your grazing season if it's protected urea for August, another round in September with sulphur, whatever it is. As Stephen was saying there, having the nutrient management plan there to refer to is good practice.
I think as well, like talking about nitrogen and phosphorus, like obviously it's critical to stay within your allowances, but sometimes I think the likes of potassium sometimes gets forgotten about this time of the year, because I suppose predominantly a lot of chemical K is applied in the back end of the year. But just I suppose take the time now while you're looking at the information, identify fields for a bit of MOP at the back end of the year, because I suppose the role of potassium within the plant is for water regulation and moving nutrients around through the grass plant. And particularly I suppose at different times of the year, we've seen this year where we kind of went into soil moisture deficits or drought, that the grass that was low in K struggled a lot. So just I suppose to identify those fields, and before you pack away the fertiliser spreader to get out that bit of K at the end of the year.
Super. Just before we wrap up, Sock Wars continues. Peter has gone for a very, very controversial avocado sock today. But a big threat to the Irish agricultural industry.
Supposedly.
Coming the whole way across the Atlantic.
Food miles. It's a disgrace, Peter.
Well, I wouldn't have even noticed until you pointed them out, Stephen.
Water consumption as well.
That's true.
John has gone for Stranger Things.
I know, I have, yeah, you smell that well.
A great show on Netflix.
I haven't even watched the show, would you believe? They're probably the brothers now.
And I've gone for The Shark.
Oh, wow.
Jesus.
With the words "bite me" on it. I think it's fair to say that Clodagh's sage green ankle sock is a bit more steady but also a bit more modern, while the tillage man Stephen had just gone, give me any pair of socks. As long as they're agriculturally coloured brown, their job is to keep my feet warm.
Say no, Stephen, or some fancy design up here if you lifted the logo, wouldn't it?
There's a few bits in there, I think. 2 lines.
Hilfiger.
Mind yourselves out there. Farm smart, farm safe. Hey, thanks for listening to the Sod Pod. We hope you enjoyed it. To find out more, head over to www.grasslandagro.ie or check out our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's all for this episode. See you next time.